Hello and welcome, friends. As you're joining, we're so glad you're here today. We're going to be talking about cultivating belonging through assessment. So if that's what you're here for, you are in the right place. We're going to give folks just a moment to join us. But as we do that, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Leslie Allen Essex, and I'm the Senior Marketing Manager of Technology here at Macmillan. Basically, what I do is I talk to all of you. I talk to professors, pretty much all day. I run lots of surveys. I gather a lot of information from you all. And in the process of doing this across all the different disciplines, I'm able to see, hey, folks in biochemistry are struggling with this, but it's really interesting because I hear people in English talking about this pain point too. And so I'm able to put you all in contact with each other, with our wonderful peer consultants like Jill and Scott, who will be speaking with you today. And I get to help just facilitate some really wonderful conversations. So that is what we will be doing today. This is going to be hands-on. We have an iClicker portion of this as well that you can join. Um, my colleague Ashley will be here as well. You'll notice the chat doesn't work, but the Q&A is enabled. So if you have any questions, comments outside of the discussion that we're having in iClicker, you can go ahead and put them in there. Ashley will be monitoring that and making sure that all of your questions are answered. So we will be here taking care of you. And I think with that, let me go ahead and share my screen and we can get going. All right, here we go. Oh, maybe. What? Oh, of course. Stand by. Never happened. Give me 1 second.
I'd say it's a Monday, but it's a Tuesday.
I don't know. It signed me out of my own account. Whatever. I'll be in just one moment. Thank you for your patience. Two-factor authentication is good security, you guys. Okay, here we go. Weird that I could use it except during slideshow mode, but see if it works now. Yeah, of course, it's fine now. Here we go. Okay, so cultivating belonging through assessments, making sure every student feels valued. I think that's really important that every student, we know that students are coming to us with a variety of different life experiences, different contexts. And so the more we can reach out to all of those students, the more we create a classroom community and the more they all succeed. So just so you know, the lay of the land, Hear From a Peer is going to be 15 minutes times two because we have two wonderful peer consultants. But welcome and introductions is this right now. Housekeeping, this is being recorded. We will send you the recording. We will send you the slides, and you get a certificate of participation for joining us today. And if we mention any other cool resources or anything, we usually try to share those out with you as well. We are going to do a hands-on AI activity, and then we have our conclusion. So let's go ahead and start by joining iClicker, and I believe my colleague Ashley will drop the iClicker code in the chat for you all. Okay, well, let me see if I can drop the code in here for you. There you go. Otherwise, you can take a picture of the QR code, or if you ever did Jackbox games, these many years ago, you can go ahead and just type join.iclicker.com and type in the 4-digit code. So I see many of you are getting in. I trust that that is working okay. That's great. I'm going to give you all just a moment. Okay. All right, so first thing, let's just make sure we know how to use it. Let's all just say hello. I'm going to go ahead and ask a short answer question. So let us know your name, your institution, and what area you teach in. And I'll give you guys just about a minute to kind of warm up and see how things are going. Okay, responses are coming in. I was like, is it not working? It's fine. All right. Ooh, law, English, marine science. That sounds cool. Psych. Okay, hang on. Let's make this a little bigger. Logic and religion, biology. Cool. I love that we have a very interdisciplinary group here today. I think we're going to have a really lovely conversation. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And we will go ahead and dive in. So I just wanted to start by kind of setting the table and talking about why are we even talking about this? Why does it matter? Like, of course, it feels good to be like, everybody's so special, which is true. And I like that part a lot. But it also has pedagogical ramifications. It improves academic performance. Like, first and foremost, when students feel like they belong, like they have a class that sees them, that hears them, that understands kind of who they are as students, and gives them space to do that, they are more likely to succeed. It's also, I don't know if you guys worry about retention. It's something I hear about a lot from instructors, this pressure to keep the students in the institution. We don't want them to give up, to, feel like, oh, I'm homesick. Oh, I don't belong here, and just wander away. Like, they're important. They need us, but we need them too. Um, it is better for their mental health. We know that this is a crisis among young people right now, is this sense of loneliness, anxiety, isolation, and building up a community and telling them that, hey, you matter, you belong here. That goes such a long way to battle against that. Um, it builds inclusive classrooms and makes sure that everyone has an opportunity to bring their context and perspective. And it fosters a growth mindset. And I think, like, as educators, this is something that is really crucial. We want them to continue learning and not just like regurgitating information, but thinking and challenging themselves and kind of going through a process of curiosity. So, as much as we can encourage them to do that, they succeed. So, with that kind of lay of the land, I'm going to go ahead and hand it to Jill first.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Jill Dahlman. I'm an associate professor of English at California North State University. And today I'm going to talk to you about a project that I've been working on for the past 15 years, which is called Grading Conferences. And before I get too into the weeds with this, I just want to let you know that this is adaptable across the curriculum. And for proof of that, we turn to my partner in crime, an associate professor of chemistry who does use grading conferences to help students understand not just what they missed on an exam, but how to overcome issues that they may have had. So next slide, please. So where this all started, I think, is important because, like many writing instructors, I was backed up with grading, like, oh my God, backed up. And I was an adjunct professor at the time. And I thought to myself, why in the heck did I get into this? And what did I like about it? And so what I started to recollect was I loved working with students one-on-one when I worked in the writing center. And then the other thing that I noticed was that students would inevitably turn to the back of the page, see the grade, and toss the paper with all the handwritten comments on it into the trash. And I thought, well, did they even look at those comments? And I felt that it was important to make feedback become supplemental instruction, be interactive, and be meaningful. So next slide, please. So I'm moving from the traditional grading, where stacks and stacks of papers, even if they're online, I may not have to tote those anymore, but they still exist. And there's only so many beverages that you can drink in a day. So next slide, please. So as I noted that I was an adjunct, but this was a K-12 educator who started out on this journey with me. I started to put the whole thing together primarily because we actually had to plan our bathroom breaks, and because we're just constantly on the freeway or constantly running without any time to do the basic necessities. So next slide, please. So years ago, you started with efficiency helpers. Those were your comment libraries that were in a Microsoft Word situation where you could copy and paste and copy and paste, or you could do recorded comments. But the problem that I still had was, how do I make the students read the comments, listen to the comments, and apply the comments? Next slide. So the one-way ticket is not working. Instead, I opted to move toward a conversation. So, and they were not understanding a lot of those comments that I would hear complaints from my peers where they would say, they're not understanding the comments, or they're not listening to the comments, or people are writing mean comments. I would hear that from my students. So next slide, please. And passive learning, if the comments aren't accessed, they're not learning. So what can they do to be better? So next slide, please. So as I said, something needed to change. Next slide. And grading conferences. The students actually like these because now I'm building a relationship with the students from the very beginning of the class, chance to talk about the paper, ask questions about their particular paper, their particular words, and they don't have to wonder about the grade because the grade is pretty much figured out right then and there. And then they started to learn, they started to apply what was learned in the conference and self-correct for the next assignment. So next slide, please. So my general process, just so that we're clear, I do read the essay out loud. I do not read it beforehand. So it's a moment of discovery for both of us. The students take the notes. I do not put notes on the paper. So that means that when you're talking about taking notes, it's they're taking what they understand and what they deem to be important. And so sitting down with the students to go over the work, one paper, one student at a time. And
Jill, to that point, we have a question in the chat. How
Sure.
big are your class sizes? What size do you do this with?
Okay, so I started with 6 classes of 20 students each. So 120 students a semester. Today, we're not talking about that because I work for this private Shay nice school, which only does pre-med. So we have different students here and different numbers. So, and plus I've got too many other administrative responsibilities, so they pull a lot of classes from me. But the most I've ever had in a semester is 120. The least I've ever had was, I believe, 105. So the good thing about these particular grading conferences is I can do it with online students too, and that also builds belonging, because the online students oftentimes feel that they're stuck out in the ether without anybody to talk to. And, then you're not this imaginary person who's leaving these comments on the papers, you're actually talking to them. And it's insanely difficult to be mean to somebody who's sitting across from you on the screen with you, what have you. So that part is also a way of tempering your anger if you have it, because I went over this, but something did not gel, and so you got to go over it a 17th time. So next slide, please. So it seems like these 30 minutes, it takes so much time to explain to a student, but it isn't, because the next grading conference becomes shorter and shorter and shorter, each subsequent one. So, and you don't have to write the same comments again and again. You're actually able to explain why the comma goes there or something like that. You're actually able to discuss what is a fragment, what is a run-on. So
there are lots of lively questions in the chat. If I could just ask you to talk really quickly. So the grade is a surprise to you both if you haven't read the paper beforehand either. Can you just talk really quickly about what the grading process looks like for that?
Sure. In the beginning, we used to sit there and talk about the grade together. Since coming to this school, I have people they should be on Let's Make a Deal. So we've changed that. So now I have them do a reflection essay. So they submit the reflection essay 3 days following their grading conference. They use my rubric and they grade themselves, and they basically argue for a specific grade on that particular paper. So sometimes, we'll be leagues apart. Sometimes I'm at a C and they're at an A, in which case then I try to meet them in the middle, but not that much. But other times we're like 1 or 2 points, apart. And I'm like, yeah, I can go with a 93. We're good. And so that's how that grading takes place.
And Jill, the first time you were describing this to me, I was like, whoa, that sounds so cool. But like, do they get the opportunity beyond this reflection to really apply the feedback that you've given them? And you mentioned that you let them rewrite things as
I
well.
do let them revise. I think it's more important that they demonstrate that they understand what they need to do. With the Comp 1 students, our 110ers, they have a revision portfolio at the end of the semester, optional. They can revise and resubmit with that. Now, I've gotten some feedback from the students with that. They would like to revise and resubmit right away instead of at the end of the semester. But my feeling is they may not, you're a dramatically different writer at the beginning than you are at the end. And I want them to have the opportunity of that wisdom, to apply that wisdom.
That's really smart. Okay,
So
thank you.
no worries. There we go. So now it becomes, like I said, it becomes a conversation. So next slide, please. And it is efficient because I'm able to go ahead and explain to the student what's going on. And because they're writing it, they're actually learning. And we all know about the studies between something magical happens between the pencil and the brain when you write it down. So now they're able to apply that commentary to a subsequent revision or to future assignments. Next slide, please. This personalized learning actually becomes really important because studies show that success in first year composition leads to stronger retention. It's also something that they're going to have to do for the rest of their lives. And so I want that positive learning experience. I want them to not feel like they did something wrong, but that maybe there's a better way of phrasing something. And I always ask them, is this what you meant to say? Because if it is, great, mission accomplished. If you were looking to say something more on this line here, let's go ahead and think of a different way that we can talk about it. And sometimes my personal favorite is when a sentence is totally completely incoherent. And I say, what did you mean to say here? And they go, I don't know. So, it gives them an opportunity to rethink. And that is really important to me. So next slide, please. So what I noticed is that there's so much better retention of the information from one assignment to the next. I went from 6 to 4 in the 110 class, which is Comp 1, and I went from 3 to 2 in Comp 2. The students have learned to self-correct. I was telling Leslie earlier today that there was a student who was Mr. Fragments everywhere. And after a while, I kind of went, that's a fragment. And then by the next essay, he was like, that's a fragment. And I'm like, yes, it is. Good. He's so okay. Now we just need to get you to self-correct. And by the end of the semester, much better, much better. They're practicing what they're learning. The grading for all of my students is, and that was with 120, was done in a week. I need to state there's a slight caveat there. When I first started this, I was at University of Hawaii at Manoa, and my chair worked with me because we wanted to make certain that all students had the opportunity to take advantage of this. So we canceled 2 classes per grading conference week so that students who could not attend could actually make appointments because they had outside obligations. And I was always meeting the 10-day deadline once that happened. So I did not have a grumpy chair. It was wonderful. So next slide, please. This is real-time authentic assessment that feels better for both instructor and for student. And it's easier for me to go ahead and say, can we try teasing this out a little bit? Let's see what, if there's a better way we could state that. And then I always approach it from a rhetorical standpoint. What are you trying to get your listener, your reader to understand? Next slide, please. Okay, and so the other thing I can do is give them advice. And I think that that's super important. Some students work best, or they've only learned one way and they're afraid to try a different way. And writing has got so many different ways. So that's when the varied strategies come in, because I'm able to have them look into different ways of approaching. For example, there's no longer a blank screen in front of them. They now start with the body, because a lot of students think they must start with an introduction. That's not always the case. So they move straight into the body of the paper, and then they take their conclusion and make it their introduction or what have you. So next slide, please. And these are some of the comments that I've gotten back. Written comments, they needed to go for clarification. With the grading conference, I can ask questions, get a quick answer. And then when I wrote the essay, I thought it would be great, but with the conference, I'm able to see the changes that would be made. And then I thought I was a bad writer, but I feel better, especially when you explain how I can make my writing stronger. And so I think that's it. I think that's my last slide. Oh, sorry. Boosting self-efficacy, yes, because the students still maintain their sparkle or their voice, and they get to come back. I've also, yes, I have done grading conferences where the student turned in an AI assignment, and I'm like, man, this doesn't sound like you. Holy mackerel! What happened here? Where's my sparkle? So next. Next slide, please. And yep, we're done. For K-12, please contact Piper Selden. She is the person who does the K-12 version of writing conferences. Otherwise, feel free to reach out for me. I'm very happy to help people.
Thank you so much, Jill. You are always so generous with your expertise. Your students appreciate it, and we appreciate it. Okay, so that has been one example coming from kind of the humanities side of things. And then we're gonna hop over and talk with my friend Scott.
We can turn off the slide presentation for just a sec if you want.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, I'm Scott Cohn. I teach psychology at Western Colorado University in Gunnison, Colorado. When we were kind of talking about this idea of belongingness, I immediately kind of gravitated towards this webinar because it really tracked something that was pretty transformational in my kind of evolution of my teaching. I was fortunate enough quite a few years ago to have a sabbatical where I was able to, my background's in neuroscience, and I was able to refocus my attention on the science of teaching and learning. And one of the outcomes of that was that I realized that I was doing a really bad job in terms of the methodology that I was using within the classroom. I mean, I had great PowerPoints and conversation starters, and there was interactivity, and yet at the same time, I eventually realized that the only thing worse than standing in front of a classroom with a PowerPoint is probably a video of you standing in front of a classroom with a PowerPoint. What troubled me most about that methodology, and I probably hear this from colleagues, maybe many of you are thinking this as well, is the question of why can't I get students to show up to class prepared? I could do so much more if my students would arrive to class having read the book or whatever other resources I've assigned, having done that in advance. And that's when I actually adopted, at the time it was Launchpad, now it's Achieve. But what I started to do was to assign things, make deadlines before we actually needed that information in class. And that freed me to completely flip my classroom to move to an entirely activity-based curriculum. And to have classrooms full of students that arrive prepared and interested in what's going to go on. I mean, ideally, I think what we aspire to do, and I teach a science-based curriculum, is to have students sort of master all of the foundational information, the knowledge and understanding of the content that's going to be used in class, and they use that classroom time to apply that knowledge, whether it's in a laboratory setting or whether it's in an activity setting within a normal classroom, or online if we're doing it by Zoom or some other method, or by discussion and asynchronous. Having that information at hand before being required to apply it was a real game changer for me in that educational process. It turned going into the classroom into an extremely fun activity, and it also gave me a real quick answer every time a colleague would say, "How come I can't get students to show up prepared?" To go, I have the solution for you. It's very easy. You don't need to just continue complaining about it. But the other piece that sort of was contemporaneous with that transition to an activity-based curriculum was understanding better how to assess student learning. Now, I'm able to assess student learning of psychological concepts, and I do that extensively through the use of Achieve, and I have my quizzes. I'll tell you that I did away with exams and moved to weekly quiz units. And so, about every 4 weeks would be 4 or 5 weeks is the equivalent of an exam. It's just they're completing those weekly. It's really helpful for a variety of reasons that I won't get into here, but devaluing high stakes assessments is the best way to thwart cheating, or one of the best ways I found to thwart cheating. However, what occurred to me quite a few years ago was that I need to separate my assessment of student learning from the assessment that I was assigning for them for a grade. And this encouraged me to really rethink that entire process. So student effort, completing those quizzes, doing activities, assignments, preparing for class, all of that. Bless you, Leslie. Um, Preparing for all of that certainly makes up a large portion of their grade, as well as their participation in the classroom activities. However, with each class period, I have a worksheet. I'll probably show a snippet of one of them a little bit later in the presentation. But what I'm doing with those worksheets is I actually provide full credit upon completion for students completing their weekly activities. Whatever we're doing in the classroom that week, it involves some amount of reflection, applying that content to their real life at a minimum. Oftentimes it's synthesizing what they've learned from the book with some experience that they've had within the classroom. And I'm soliciting their feedback to understand whether or not I was successful as an instructor in that applied activity. They receive full credit for participating in it, and yet it informs me. And recently, I've mentioned this, is that it's really been helpful in identifying incidents of cheating, however low or wherever they might exist. When I start to see a difference between how students are performing on their own on Achieve quizzes, and then I see really, responses that are lacking in terms of my questioning, it's just an indicator for me that something's amiss. So I've actually discovered that in one of my upper level courses last spring. And so I'm in the process of making some adjustments just based on that. Um, but one thing I would say is that, like, I use Achieve, it's heavily resourced. I have every video has a quiz attached to it, every concept practice, infographic, and huge pools of questions. And the reason that I bring this up is to have students show up to class prepared requires quite a bit of work on the instructor side. And I'm fortunate enough to have publisher resources to use. Um, but I also know how difficult it is to generate those resources on your own. When I do develop textbook resources, I do item writing, and so I'm very familiar with that process. And never, as a professional item writer, have I ever written items by myself. This, so when you are editor one, editor two, and the copy editor of every single one of your questions, it's going to be a disaster. And that oftentimes prevents us from coming up with sort of quick assessments within the classroom. I gave all that kind of background information about the fact that I teach an activity-based curriculum, that I am very focused on student sense of belonging within the classroom, actively soliciting their feedback, and trying to separate that from the feedback that they received for their actual performance. But I wanted to show you one little trick. If you don't have access to a huge question pool, if you don't, and you're wondering, how do I generate items? How do I quiz my students? How can I create a quiz every single day? How can I create iClicker questions that are easily accessible so I can see if my students are arriving to class prepared? So I started from scratch a conversation with ChatGPT. Said I wanted to create 10 multiple choice questions related to theories of emotion. This is a common topic in psychology. And you can see it very quickly generates 10 questions. I specified various theories and laid out 10 questions. Certainly proofread, double check. The most common error, even if you're generating and writing your own questions, is going to be a second correct answer. Make sure that whoever is generating those questions, that's what you're looking for. But not having to write them, I mean, this was a few seconds. Can we take a look at the next slide there? Yeah, we get to the end. I mean, look, it says, do I want an editable version, a Google Doc? Can I put it in a Word format? I mean, hey, I had to put it into a PowerPoint and then sent it to Leslie. So it's going to take care of all of these things for us. And I say putting it into a PowerPoint because this is instant iClicker material. These basic questions, these are very basic questions, are easier to generate than more challenging application level questions. And if we're dealing with multiple choice, we'll call that kind of the ceiling. But if we could take a look, I'll ask ChatGPT for some help, right? It offered to do all that, but I said, not quite yet. How about taking the first 5 questions and making them all application level in Blooms with different names, characters in each question? Let's take a look what it did. Voila, again, I didn't have to sit there and write. I mean, writing out questions can take an extraordinary long period of time, and then accuracy checking those. I prefer to just stick with the accuracy checking portion. Notice the names, diverse list of names it's putting out. Sometimes you can even ask it to be more diverse in terms of the names, scenarios, things that it searches for, but it does this with ease. I'm not done yet, though. Let's take a look what else we have. Yeah. Oh my goodness. The hardest thing for folks to come up with, positive, constructive feedback for wrong answers. It's going to do this immediately. As soon as I asked for it, it was seemingly excited. It's giving me the correct answer, but it's also explaining why each of the wrong answers is plausible and where it would be correct, which is feedback that we really have to work with item writers to develop. Lots of item writers just think with the no, that's not the right answer. And so to go, this would actually fit in this particular context, to encourage students to persist. We can see this continuing. But I have more. Think I do. Don't? Yeah. I don't want you to think that using this to create sort of resources that are going to allow you to engage your students in the classroom very quickly is just limited to kind of a gen ed course. I wanted to pivot to my senior seminar course. As I said, my background's in neuroscience. I teach and currently teaching a course in behavioral pharmacology. This is something that I'm working on this week and next week with my students. And so I figured take a risk, roll it out, let you all see what I'm working on. I've been doing, having ChatGPT create clinical case studies for me for several semesters now. It's fantastic for this. This is my 3rd spring teaching behavioral pharmacology, where I have access to almost an unlimited number of clinical case studies. Within the field of psychology, this stuff is gold. You'd be lucky to find even a handful of decent case studies floating around on the internet. And yet, when I asked GPT to do it, it immediately worked up a clinical case study. And this is a full clinical case study, provides background, substance use history. If we can go to that next slide, we'll see there's even more here. Provides the diagnostic criteria. So we can see this is a severe alcohol use disorder, meeting 9 of the 11 criteria. This is a really obvious case. When I use these kinds of clinical case studies for students, I actually went back and looked to try to see which of the diagnostic criteria they're most likely to miss. And so I was able to create an assignment that was custom tailored to my class this semester, specifically by giving a prompt to generative AI to focus on clinical criteria that are often missed and to obscure it with another disorder. So let's take a look at that next slide. You can see I'm very polite with GPT. I'm still not entirely sure. I'm not that they're not going to take over the world. So I try to be as polite as possible to my chatbots. But I identified giving up an activity someone once enjoyed. Oftentimes people view partying as an activity. And so there's a loss of understanding of what they've kind of walked away from and the effort that's involved in maintaining that lifestyle and that level of use. And you can see I gave the instructions that I wanted students potentially miss the substance use disorder simply because there is social anxiety going on. It immediately put together yet another clinical case study custom tailored for that specific classroom experience. In all of these cases, what I would say is that for me to try to construct these things is far more difficult than to have ChatGPT do it. And I'm assuming you can see that part of it. But what might be missed is that I have my own personal history and background, my lens that I look at things through. And so to try to kind of see things outside of that is difficult. And yet by passing that task off to a chatbot, it takes that heavy lifting portion of it off of us, particularly when it comes to diverse examples, relatable examples, right? We can narrow and refocus some of these prompts to appeal specifically to certain age categories to avoid examples that they may not understand. This has been just super helpful in terms of preparing for class and creating really engaging classroom activities for my students to participate in. So I'm excited for the activity we're going to do. So I'll be quiet.
We have a couple questions for you, Scott,
Leslie.
before I start driving. Could you give us an example of an activity that you do in your class and what you have students do to prepare for it beforehand? Just a quick one if you've got one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of one that might really be helpful and relatable to as many people as possible. But here's an example with social psychology as a particular topic. So I have some sociologists in here. Maybe they'll enjoy it as well. They're going to take a practice quiz. They're going to review infographics about, I don't know, fundamental attribution theories, things along those lines. Watch videos, stranger effects, all kinds of things along those lines. I'm pretty sure my book has a whole thing about the Kitty Genovese story, and so they're really kind of immersing themselves in social psychology. When they come into the classroom for that day, I usually do. I think it's called jigsaw approach. I just keep reshuffling them from group to group. Sometimes this terminology I find kind of amusing, but I shuffle them from group to group and have them come up with examples of, say, a false consensus effect or the kind of fundamental attribution, just world hypothesis, any of these. And actually act them out, come up with examples from their own life about where they observe this occur. Their worksheet for that day provides their example as well as asks them about other examples, so they're attentive to other student groups that may be presenting on these. And then I just reshuffle them again, so we're probably doing this 3 or 4 times over the course of the class period. That would be a pretty typical activity day. The students basically leave with firsthand information about how these theories apply to their own lives. And my question to them is always, what mattered most? What was most important? What did you find most interesting? Or what was your biggest takeaway? And so I'll often hear from students, I use this as an opportunity to say, my knee-jerk reaction right now when a student isn't present is to wonder if they're okay, not to be mad that they're not there, right? To not blame the character, but to go back and try to view it in a broader context. And students generally think about how that applies to their own lives as well, not judging so quickly.
Awesome. I'm just taking a look at the chat. We have some questions about AI citation, prompts, what platform you use. I'm going to circle back to these after we do our activity together because you're going to have a chance to actually jump in and use AI yourselves. So we are going to create, maybe audit was a scary word to use, but we're going to create a belonging checklist that you can use with your own assessments. So the goal of this activity is we're going to look through and you're going to think about your own population of students at your institution. Create a list of things that you know that maybe you want to keep an eye out for in your assessments to make sure that your assessments fit your student population. Then we are going to take that checklist and turn it into an AI prompt so that you can really easily review your assignments, and it will give you suggestions if, for example, you could improve in one area. It will tell you like, hey, here are some ideas that you can include a few different real world applications or things like that. So let us go ahead and start by kind of establishing what are our 4 categories going to be. And you're going to be choosing your own kind of criteria within these categories. The first thing that we want to think about is language and tone. We want to make sure that our language makes sense to people, that it's clear, that the students understand what is being asked of them. The next thing to think about is accessibility and format, and we'll dive in a little bit more into each of these as we go, but just to kind of level set. So when we say accessibility and format, we mean like if they need a text to voice reader, do they have access to that? But it can also mean like, do they have internet at home? Access has a lot of sort of different axes to think about. Representation and relevance, you want to make sure that the context reflects your students and the variety of your students, not just a subset of them. And then feedback and personalization, something Jill talked about a lot, about encouraging and fostering that growth mindset so that students understand, even if I don't get it right away, I still belong here in this classroom. And Scott and Jill will be sharing some examples from their classes as well. But I ask all of you participants on a piece of paper or in a browser, on your phone, wherever, take a look at these criteria for language and tone and think about which 2 you want to assess your assessments for. So think about which ones you want to kind of keep an eye out for when you're looking at your assessments. You want to keep it growth oriented. You want to really focus on improvement rather than fixed ability. Like we mentioned earlier, clear expectations is something that can make a big difference for a lot of students. Inclusive vocabulary. I know that there was an instance where there was an international student and she did not get a lot of the pop culture references from the US because she didn't grow up with this stuff. You can't just be like, oh, the Kardashians, and expect everyone is necessarily going to know that. Supportive framing. So talking about support, encouragement, and creating a structure in which students kind of know what the next step should be. And then this is a tough one. Like Scott said, we all have our own lens, and it's really hard to see outside of it. So AI can be a really powerful tool in identifying any potential biases. So I'm going to actually ask in iClicker, which 2 of these, oh, we're going to do multiple answers since it's 2. Which 2 of these do you want to focus on for your assessments? And we'll give you, this is a multiple answer, it should be pretty quick. So we'll give you like 30-ish seconds. And let me drop the iClicker in the chat again, in case people closed out. Okay, let's take a look. All right, a pretty even spread. That's awesome. And these are all different things that various people, maybe you're really, really strong in clear expectations. You know, you are so good at that. You don't really need to like do an extra review for that, but you do want help with bias in language. This is tailored to you and your students. So all of these are the correct answer. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close this one out. Now, Scott, Jill, do you have any examples of times where you adjusted language and tone and it helped a student? Or where language and tone maybe caused a problem for a student?
Sure. I think that a lot of times when you handwrite comments or something like that, that you might mean to be jokey. You're joking around, but it doesn't come off that way. It comes off pretty mean. So I think that instead, as an example, my writing in the health sciences students right now are writing graphic narratives about a particular condition. And when one of the students had some issues with some of the drawings, I was laughing. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so funny. And they came in and they were horror stricken that, oh my God, this was, I know that they couldn't make it correct, what they saw is correct, but they didn't. But I don't think that it's possible for me to go ahead and convey humor in writing easily. So
Yeah.
that was an example of me being able to do that.
Scott, is there anything you wanted to add?
Um, the example that I think we chatted about, and it's a slight departure, but it's one of the reasons that I moved away from open educational resources in my large gen ed courses or large survey classes is because the resources aren't accessible. They're not inclusive. I had a student last spring that was in my class that was an English language learner from Japan. The ability for her to simply change the text-to-speech language on um, the the e-reader in Achieve was a game changer for her. I have
Yeah.
had similar issues with students in previous semesters. So the other piece of it, which I definitely want to make sure I include, really building on what Jill said, anything negative that you say is what students kind of adhere to. And so I commented that my better half for years taught in elementary education, and 5 positive comments for anything critical before you say something to a student. Um, no matter how awful something is on the feedback that I provide, I try to give positive feedback. They've turned it in. That's fantastic. They've made an attempt. That's great. There is something that I might be able to pull out of there that needs sort of additional building out because they spent 5 minutes on it. Um, all of those things need to be included. In terms of negative feedback, I prefer that in a one-on-one conversation rather than letting students know. I might say there's some things missing. I'd love to talk with you about that. Please stop by.
Mhm.
And I provide credit for revisions. And so it's please stop by. Let's improve this grade. Let me help you with that, rather than pointing out all the things that are wrong. So I would just say, before you make a negative comment, think of 5 things. And if you can't think of 5 positive things to say, then no negative comment for you.
All right. So our next category is accessibility and format. And again, pick the ones that resonate for you and your student. Do you want to think about offering assessments in multiple modalities? Maybe some students are super introverted and they would rather die than give a class presentation. Or maybe they're theater kids like me and they want to be up there in front of everyone. Like there are different areas in which different people feel comfortable presenting information. You want to make sure that your own organization is very clear so that they know what's up. Universal design. This is something I'm still learning about. It's the idea that there are simple design aspects that make things like if someone's colorblind, I'm not colorblind, so I don't know where that causes problems, but you can have it review if you're doing anything image heavy or if you're using a lot of different colors, you can have it take a look and say like, oh, actually this could cause a problem for some people. Timing flexibility, we know that our students have all different kinds of lives going on. They're parents, they're working, they're taking care of their grandpa. Like stuff happens, life happens, and being flexible about time makes assessment more accessible to a larger group of students. And then I keep talking about clarity. I just like, Scott, you were talking about reading level earlier, about making sure the students can really understand not just what is being communicated to them, but what is being asked of them.
Oh yeah, I think this is a flaw that many of us as faculty have, which is that we select a book that we personally like and we enjoy, or we what we want students to get out of our course, rather than trying to figure out what is the best text for the students that are going to be in my class. So, for example, the textbook that I use is specifically written for English language learners. It isn't dumbed down. It simply avoids any complex vocabulary that might trip up English language learners. Any terms that would be kind of complicated are defined within the text. And again, you know, not to keep bashing on OER, but every video that I have has quizzes attached to it. Every activity has a quiz after it. And I know that all of my resources are they're universal design, and my course is universally accessible. This is a huge thing for me is I never have to, when I get accommodation requests, it's wonderful. I just immediately email back, have no fear, this course is universally accessible. It is already set up with double time for quizzes, for additional time for other activities.
Mhm.
Every student has that opportunity. And so it's accessible to all.
I love that. Okay, so you, audience, my friends, we are going to go ahead and ask this. Which of these do you want to do to make sure your students feel like they belong? And I like watching the answers come in real time. Oh, actually, I shouldn't cover the question though. I'll give you just a moment and then we'll look at the answers together. Excellent. A widespread. I love it. We all have different things to consider, right? I really like this. Okay, I'm going to stop this. We're going to go ahead. So category 3 is representation and relevance. So including diverse examples. Um, one of my friends, 35-year-old woman in New York, never driven a car. She lives in New York. Why would she drive a car? But you know, if you come to her and you're like, okay, imagine you're steering a car, she's gonna be like, what the hell? So just kind of think about who is your audience? What is their life experience like? Avoid assumptions. Make sure that it validates and acknowledges different student experiences and perspectives. And then real world connections. This one is really a way to help your students see that they belong, but also to motivate them. If you can say, for example, if you use our goal setting and reflection surveys in Achieve, one of the questions is, what is your major? What do you want to do when you grow up? And you could circle back and say, like, hey, you know, a bunch of you are in this class because you want to be nurses. So let me write applications that are relevant to nursing. You can really tailor things to make sure that it suits your student population. And you can do that on all different kinds of like different aspects of their experience. And then student voice, if you can let the students bring their outside life experience into the classroom, if you can help them connect back to their real life, it makes it fun and it gives them different ways of belonging. We are running short on time. So if one of you wants to give one quick example,
I think I have it on the
I
very
think you
next
have a
page.
slide for us, Scott.
I do. Yeah, I popped that in there. Thank you. Popped it in there for us. Um, Somebody had asked about an example of how I assess student activities in the Q&A. And this is an example. I use multitasking. This is a chapter on consciousness, I think, within the psychology curriculum. And so we look at multitasking. We also talk about sleep and sleep disorders. Um, in class, I'll have them brainstorm about things that they do where they're really good multitaskers. things that they do where they're really bad multitaskers. We also try a couple of different um, suggestions that are in the book on how to improve the quality of your sleep. I'll ask actually for students to volunteer. And so then you can see this assessment, they're going to receive full credit on it. But what I want to know is like, what was one of the things that they did that worked that they're going to use immediately? Where are they multitasking well in their life? Are they able to sort of process that? Um, I mean, I could ask them, which, some behavioroid question, are you going to do less of that in the future or something? But I think the answer is obvious. I just really wanted folks to see, like, my quizzes are not easy. They're all application level questions because they're just very difficult to answer unless you're kind of continuously going through and learning about the topics to answer an applied question. But in the classroom and the assessment that I conduct in the classroom, it's all about what did you get out of this activity? And to your last slide, Leslie, it's soliciting their voice, right? It's how is this relevant to them? What are they taking away from it? Um, what are they going to incorporate about what they learned into their own lives?
Okay, I'm not going to ask iClicker questions for these ones, but go ahead and think to yourself, which one of these do you want to review your assessments for to make sure that your students all belong? I'll give you a second to jot that down. And then
And oh
I
my
want to go
gosh, I
to our
realize how
last
late we're
category
on
and give
time.
you our AI prompt before the end of our session. We've had a very lively conversation. I love it. I do want to make sure that you get the final product, which is this AI prompt for you. Okay, last category. I'm going to go really fast. Feedback and personalization. Think about ways that you can personalize the feedback, make it more human, make sure that it fosters a growth mindset. We've talked a lot, all of us, about constructive tone, encouraging learning, creating this safe environment. So think about which of these criteria for feedback and personalization you want to focus on with your students. Give you a second to jot that down. And then I want to make sure that you get this AI prompt. So you can use this over and over and over again. You can run as many assessments as you want of like your assignments. So the way it would work, and I'm just going to kind of break it down. Perhaps some of you are very fluent in AI, but just if you haven't used it before, I'm going to tell you why I wrote the prompt the way I did. I always start by introducing myself and giving it that context of what I want it to do. And in fact, I would even improve what I have here. It just says I'm a course instructor, but if you don't specify, it might think you're a high school teacher. It might think you're a K-12 teacher. Tell it you're a college instructor. Tell it your area. And then say, I currently have my students do this activity. You can give them the actual, like, you can upload a document if you have a worksheet, you can give them an assignment description, whatever it is that you give your students, give it to the AI and then ask it, I want to run it through this checklist for these 4 criteria. And then drop in your own checklist considerations that you just selected, the things that you said were important to you and your students. Say, look at my assessment for these categories. Tell me where it's really good. I want to know. I want to know where I'm good at things. And then tell me where I can improve it, and if so, how. So that is your golden nugget that you have gleaned from this webinar, that you built your own checklist considering your own students. And I hope that you can use this. We will be sending this prompt out to you. You'll be getting the whole deck, so you'll see all of the great examples. And you will also be able to use this with your courses. I hope summer's coming. We're almost there. And as you're starting to think about things for next semester, maybe you can, and you don't have to do it for everything. Like you can if you want. If you do, great. But start with just one. See if it makes a difference. Try it with your students. See how it goes. If you want to do more, you can. I just want to give you tools that help you create the classroom that you want for your actual students. So, thank you all so much for being here, spending an hour out of your day. Oh, Scott with his emoji. I love it. We really appreciate your time. You will be getting a follow-up email with all kinds of resources, and we will be sending out this slide deck as well. So thank you all very much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much, friends.
Thanks all.
And thank you to
Great
our
chatting with
wonderful
you.
presenters. As always, you were so gracious, answered tons of questions, and we love that you shared your expertise with us. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.